This is chapter 19, called Two Choices. By the way, just from a cursory glance through, I saw that there were topics of eating disorders, specifically bulimia. So if any part of this is too triggering for you, of course you're welcome to leave and come back if you want. Completely up to you. But this is a happy story, and she's very healthy now, and so it might be relatable, if a little uncomfortable. Nonetheless, let's begin. It was mid-February of 1997, and only a few weeks were left of the fall-winter semester. Swamiji had not visited, even though he'd promised he would in January. I lived in my personal edition of the agony and the ecstasy. The ecstasy was more constant and replete with tears streaming down my face. In class, at the grocery store, in my car listening to the cassette Swamiji and I had made before I left India. As one of the homework projects he gave before I left, he asked me to prepare a book of the ashram's morning prayers in English. 6 or 7 Vedic prayers, mantras, and songs that we sang each morning from 5 to 5:30, followed by his Hindi lecture until 6. The ashram had Hindi prayer books, but none had an English translation or even a transliteration. On the morning before, I was forcibly peeled off the wall of the reception office and packed into the back seat of a car to Delhi to fly back to America. Swamiji and I had sat on the floor of his meeting room, and he had played the harmonium and sung each prayer line by line. He had followed every prayer with a translation and profound commentary on each line. I had recorded it all on a boombox, a gift from an anonymous devotee that had lain in storage till then and would have been the envy of Venice beach crowds a decade earlier. How many of you still have a boombox? I wonder. Probably not many. I played the cassette I recorded that day over and over in my car the 3 months I was still in California. And by the time I got back to the ashram in April, even though I still couldn't speak a word of Hindi, I had memorized all the songs. The waves of ecstasy ebbed into stillness, a stillness in the world but not of it. For the first time in my life, everything was just right. No drama, no excitement, no passion in those moments, just a stillness in which my mind and I were actually friends. That was one end of the seesaw, ecstasy ebbing into stillness, and stillness flowing into ecstasy. Sitting heavily on the other end of the seesaw was my bulimia. Although I hadn't thrown up once, or even had a thought about what I was eating, during the 3 months I'd been in Rishikesh, the bulimia returned about a month after I was back in California. However, it had a new quality to it. Rather than me using it as a tool to stay afloat in the ocean of my inner world, a tool to numb feelings I believed would have swallowed me whole, a tool to stuff them, so to speak, and then a tool to forcibly extricate my feelings from within me as though they could hitch a ride on the back of Mrs. Field's cookie. Now, instead, the bulimia was being used by some hitherto unknown part of my ego to make me not live my life. The bulimia no longer soothed me. It was no longer the bridge from anxiety and overwhelmed to endorphin-induced calm. Now, it was being used by my ego quite deliberately to convince me that I was still sick, that I was not spiritual, and that I had not actually had a spiritual awakening. Look, here I was vomiting. I could not possibly be spiritual, I thought. Now, rather than feeling relieved afterward, I felt as though the previous owner of my home had shown up in a delusional fugue, thinking this was still her house. Each time I threw up, my ego pushed the play button on a recorded script in my mind's ear. You cannot go back to India, see? You are sick. You need to be in therapy. You must stay here. What happened in India was just an illusion. You are not that spiritual person you think you are. You are sick. You are crazy. You need help. I started to believe the voice. Who did I think I was, anyway? You don't just heal from trauma by grace. Pathologies are not washed away by sacred rivers. The whole thing must have been an illusion. Then the seesaw would tilt and the ecstasy would wash over me, thawing out the part that had frozen into fear. As the ecstasy rose within, it carried the rivers of my thoughts into its ocean of stillness. The vomiting ceased. I could sit again in the presence of my own breath. I was again one with the universe, beaming at every checkout clerk, every professor, every neighbor, bellowing Hindi prayers at the top of my lungs as I drove down Highway 101. So, what do you think? I asked Kim, my therapist, best friend, mentor, and love of my life. Should I go back or not? Am I really supposed to be in India, or should I stay here like everyone is telling me to? Kim looked at me softly and said, "When I look at you, I see a woman in India. Although you are sitting here in front of me today, what I see is a woman in India. You are already on a soul level back in India. It seems to me you really have only two choices. You can either torment yourself for the next 6 weeks, pretending to make a decision that has already been made, or you can spend the next 6 weeks packing up your stuff and preparing to move to India." Many spiritual lineages teach that thoughts are things. They are not just empty, random electrical firings of our neurons. Rather, they are actual things, carrying metaphysical weight and energy, reaching out from the gray and white matter of our brains into the world, creating our reality. Words are also things. Kim's gentle pronouncement turned our conversation of two into a party of three. Now, instead of just Kim and me, there was also truth. Her word had, like naughty kids in a Dr. Seuss book, leaped off her tongue, rushed to the corner of the room where truth had been hiding, pulled back its covers, and unveiled it as a tangible presence in the room. There was almost an audible, "Aha." "Oh," I said, staring at the truth, for I didn't realize it had been hidden in the corner the whole time. "Yes, of course you are right." We both laughed, softly and gently at first, in due reverence for the moment, and then in full gleeful abandonment, for with truth now occupying most of the space in the room, there was really not much else to talk about. We laughed, the unabashed laughter of seeing and being seen. The presence of that truth, simple, unanalyzed, tangible, precluded any further presence of untruth. As darkness cannot coexist with light, so untruth cannot coexist with truth. I could wallow in the rehearsed drama of my own personal script of illness, of pathology, of brokenness, of victimhood, only as long as truth stayed covered and cowering in the corner. The moment it claimed its presence, the untruth dissipated as naturally and automatically as darkness dissipates when a match is struck or a candle is lit. The next day, I looked in the yellow pages for long-term storage and made an appointment to speak with the dean of my graduate school to discuss a 1-year official leave of absence. I rented a storage facility for 1 year, took a 1-year leave of absence, and arranged to have my mail forwarded to my parents' address for a year. India was right for me. That was obvious. However, at 25, I had never been one to say things like forever or for the rest of my life. I could not see the rest of my life. I had no view of the future or myself in it. I could only see now, and now I knew India was home. As I stopped from the familiar drama of conflicted decision-making process into the truth of knowing I was going back to India, my confusion and agony ceased, dismantling the stage on which my ego performed and leaving it stranded like a confused actor, still in full makeup and costume long after the show is over. The lights have come on and the audience has left. The bulimia ceased, for the pain that had caused it and propelled it truly was taken that evening in the waters of the Ganga, almost 6 months prior, in my early days at the ashram. The recent episodes were, I realized, simply my ego, the out-of-work actor continuing to scream its lines from the street corners of my psyche. The script was so familiar, perhaps I forgot that the show ended long ago. Thank you for listening. That was the end of the 19th chapter. Let us begin 20th next time. So what have we learned? Our dear author, Sadhvi Bhagawati Saraswati, she had an episode return of her eating disorder when she came back from India to America. And she felt conflicted between her spiritual truth and her ego's performance. And when she realized that the nature of it was so, due to the helpful words of her best friend, her therapist, that the decision had already been made, that she could let that go and fully decide to move to India. I look forward to seeing that unfold with you as we continue reading.